God's story, scene 1.
The Genesis, or...
Oh, we messed up already. Go.
In the beginning, there was nothing but God. And so God spoke, and there was light. Over the course of 7 days, God created all things. The earth, animals, fish, the entire universe, and finally a man, created to be like himself.
Not bad.
But God saw that man was lonely, and so he created a woman to be his companion.
Not bad. Hey, come over here, let's go for a walk.
Everything was perfect. God had provided the man and woman everything they needed, and they were in a relationship with him, just as he planned. Until one day.
Hey, girlfriend.
Who, me?
No, I'm talking to the only other woman on the whole planet. Yes, you.
Oh, what's up?
Well, I was just wondering, you and that dude you hang out with, you seem to have it pretty good around here, but I noticed you never eat from this tree here. What's up with that?
Oh, well, God has given us just one rule, that we can't eat the fruit from that tree. If we do, we'll die.
Oh, please. Get out of here. For eating one piece of fruit, you won't die. Are you telling me that you've got the run of the whole world here, but you're scared to eat from one little tree?
I'm not scared. I'm not chicken.
Prove it.
What?
I said, prove it.
Oh,
Hey, Eve, what's going on? Oh, I'm starved. Give me some of that, yeah. Oh.
They had broken the one rule that God had given, and as a result, messed up a perfect relationship with the perfect God. They were banished from the Garden of Eden and had to spend their days laboring for the food that had once been provided for them. Time passed, and Adam and Eve had 2 sons. Abel was a shepherd.
Howdy!
And Cain was a farmer.
Yeehaw.
I just feel so blessed by God. He's given me animals, and they're just growing, and they're strong, and they're healthy, and I got God to praise for that, and I'm just going to give him the best of what I've got.
Yeah, I love being a farmer. I just love working out in the hot sun all day. Gee, thanks, God. Yeah, I guess I'll bring some of my crops as an offering to God, too. What are you looking at? I'm not going to give him my best stuff. Psh.
God was pleased with Abel's sincere offering of his best sheep. But Cain, not so much.
What?
God said to Cain, "Why are you so angry? You need to get control of that before it leads you to sin."
Yeah, I'll work on that. Forget that noise. Hey, Abel, there's this
what?
thing I've been meaning to show you on the
sweet.
field
I
over
love
here.
to see things.
No,
What do you got?
It's just this thing right over here. Ah!
Oh!
So Cain killed Abel, and the first murder had been committed. From then on, things didn't get much better. Man continued to get more and more evil and grow further and further apart from God. And that relationship that God once had with people, his very reason for creating them, was long gone. So God decided to start over. He brought on a huge flood, destroying everyone in the world, except one man's family, whom he shut into a boat with 2 of every animal.
They just wish they were dead from the smell.
Noah's family was saved from the flood and got busy repopulating the earth. Scene 2, the promise. Time passed, and even though God had shown with the flood that he meant business, most people ignored him and continued to sin. But a few people really tried to follow him. One such person was a man named Abraham.
Abraham.
What? Who is it? Who's talking to me?
It's me, God.
Oi! God is talking to me. Oh, what have I done that you honor me?
You have obeyed me, and so I make a promise to you. I will give you more descendants than the stars in the sky. I will make a nation of people out of you, and they will be my people.
That's great, God. But where am I going to put all the people? I just have this one-bedroom tent.
I will give you a land of your own. I will show you a wonderful land that I will give to your descendants. You will defeat all those who live in this land if you trust and obey me. It will be a land flowing with milk and honey.
Wow.
Now go.
And so the promise was made, a promise that would show God's faithfulness time and again, even though it would be a while before it actually happened. So time passed, and Abraham and Sarah gave birth to a son. God came to Abraham and told him to sacrifice Isaac to him as a test. Abraham was just about to go through with it when an angel stopped him.
Abraham, stop! You don't have to go through with it, Abraham. God was just testing you, and you passed.
Don't do that to me!
More time passed, and Isaac had kids of his own, 2 sons, Jacob and Esau. Jacob eventually had 12 sons of his own, one whom was named Joseph. The story of Joseph and his brothers is well known, so we can kind of fast forward through this a little bit. Jacob loved Joseph the most and gave him a special colored coat. The brothers hated Joseph and sold him into slavery. Joseph worked for a guy named Potiphar, but got thrown into prison when Potiphar's wife hit on him.
Oh!
Pharaoh was disturbed by some weird dreams and heard of a guy in prison who could interpret dreams. Joseph told Pharaoh that his dreams meant that there was a famine coming throughout Egypt, and in 7 years there'd be no food. Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of Egypt, and Joseph stockpiled the food for time of famine, saving Egypt. Joseph's whole family joined Joseph in Egypt during the famine. Years passed and Joseph's family got larger and larger. This is where God's promise to Abraham became true. Remember, Abraham was Joseph's great-grandfather. Eventually, Joseph died, but his family kept getting larger and larger. A new Pharaoh came to power who didn't remember Joseph or like the fact that all those Israelites were in Egypt. He enslaved them all, but they just kept on multiplying until there were about 2 million of them. The Pharaoh decided to put an end to the Israelites once and for all. He decreed that any Hebrew boys during that time would be put to death. It was at this time that Moses was born.
Hey! Hey, that was awesome.
Scene 3.
We did that. That's
job.
great.
Where's the
Or,
water?
Enter Moses,
Right here.
Exodus.
I'm thirsty.
I think
Get
that's
it,
good.
Exodus.
We did a good job.
I think so.
What?
Anyway, it was that time that
was
Moses
really
was
good.
born.
Yeah, do you think we should
Yeah, you guys don't forget, because we got the thing coming.
Oh, what? Huh?
What?
What?
It was that time that Moses was born.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, all right.
I'm Moses. So here's the deal. I grew up as a prince in Egypt, and then I killed a man kind of accidentally on purpose. So then I ran away to Midian.
Welcome to Midian, land of adventure and intrigue. Could I interest you in some of my wares?
No, thanks. So anyway, I'm in Midian, and God speaks to me from a burning bush, tells me to go back to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to set all the Israelites free from slavery.
Moses, you must be joking.
So here I am.
I will never release your people.
Tough luck, Pharaoh. God's going to bring his power against you.
And to make a long story short,
Too late.
he did.
Let the plagues begin. Blood in the Nile.
Frogs!
Flies. Flies.
Gnats. Ow. Ow. Ah.
Dead livestock.
Boils. Ow, these things hurt so bad. Ouch.
Hail.
Locusts!
Darkness. It's so dark. Can't see anything. It's so dark.
And finally, the death of every firstborn son in Egypt.
Israelites, if you take the blood of a perfect lamb and put it on your doorpost tonight, God will pass over your house when the plague of death kills all the firstborn sons.
And God did.
Moses, my son is dead. Take your people and go.
430 years of slavery. Over. Come on, Israelites, follow me.
And everything was going great.
We're
Following the leader, the leader, the leader. We're following the leader.
About the first 5 minutes.
Moses, Do we have to go this way? I mean, the Red Sea is in front of us, and we're not going to be able to cross that, and Pharaoh's behind us. He's gonna kill us. Why did you take us out here to die?
I wish we were back in Egypt.
I wish I were dead.
Enough!
Oh.
All right. All right. Ha!
And so God allowed Moses to part the Red Sea, leading the Israelites through on dry ground, but the Egyptians were destroyed as the water filled back in. Over the next year, many things happened, and the Israelites wandered in the desert toward the land that God had promised Abraham, the place that had become known as the Promised Land. God gave them the 10 Commandments to obey,
Here they are.
which they immediately began disobeying.
Oi.
They complained that they were hungry,
We're hungry.
so God gave them manna, which fell from the sky. They complained that they were thirsty,
We're thirsty.
so God gave them water from a rock. They got sick of manna,
We don't like manna.
so God provided them quail for them to eat.
Tastes like chicken.
This is how it went for the year that it took to get to the Promised Land. The Israelites were disobedient and whiny, and God continued to forgive and provide until at last they arrived at the Promised Land.
Israelites, come on, we've made it. This is the place. This is the land that God promised to Abraham, a land flowing with milk and honey.
Moses, does it have to be milk? I'm lactose intolerant, and
Quiet. I've sent spies ahead of us into the land to tell us about what we will find there.
I'm back.
oh, what did you find?
There's people there. And they're big. And they're gonna make dangerous enemies.
Oh man, come on!
Well, that's just great.
I know. What are we gonna do?
I wish we were back in Egypt.
I wish I were dead.
Enough whining! God has promised He would give us this land, and yet you still complain. He has promised He will defeat our enemies for us, and yet you still refuse to trust Him. Well, that's it. I've had it with you. Ah!
And so God, who had led the Israelites to the Promised Land, punished them. They were forced to wander the desert for the next 40 years. None of those who saw God's wonders in Egypt ever got to see the Promised Land,
Aw, man.
including Moses.
Oh, man.
To make a long story short,
Too late.
40 years passed. Scene 4, wandering in the desert.
Or get off at the next exit. I've got sand in my shoe.
Moses died, and God chose a new leader for the Israelites named Joshua.
Hey there.
Joshua was humble
Hey there.
and led the Israelites well. At last, it was time to re-enter the Promised Land. Joshua led the Israelites into the Promised Land, and this time they were ready to trust God and do this whole thing His way.
All right, listen up, Israelites. There are many people living in this land who are going to try to stop us from moving in.
Hey, did we make reservations?
Pay attention. All right. Now, as long as we obey God, things will go well for us. However, if we disobey, we will have trouble.
And that was the way it worked. When they obeyed God and did things His way, nobody could stop them.
Yeah! Woo!
But when they let sin into the picture or disobey God, even the wimpiest enemies beat them. And in this way, they eventually took over most of Canaan, the Promised Land. When they obeyed, they won.
Yeah! Woo! Yeah!
When they disobeyed, they lost. They won some.
Yeah!
They lost some. Sometimes
Yeah.
they...
Get the picture.
Okay. Jeez. Okay, where was I? Okay, where?
Oh, right here.
Oh.
And in this way, they eventually took over most of Canaan.
Right. Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thanks. Awesome. Okay. And this way, they eventually took over most of Canaan. Scene 5, entering the Promised Land.
Or milk and honey.
I thought he said elk and bunnies.
Before his death, Joshua gave the Israelites some instructions.
I'm going to die soon.
Die? I didn't even know he was sick.
I'm not sick, I'm old. All right, pay attention. Don't forget what God has done for you. Now, there's one thing that remains that he wants you to do. Now that we possess almost all of Canaan, we need to clear the remaining peoples out of there.
Do we have to do that?
Yes, you do.
But why?
Because God wants you to.
We will. We'll do it.
Yeah, we promise.
Yeah.
We'll do it.
Yeah, like I've never heard that before.
And so Joshua died. And to make a long story short,
Too late.
the Israelites ignored God's command to clear out all the other people living in Canaan. Scene 6, the judges.
Can we get off this ride? I'm sick of going in circles.
The time of the judges was a tricky one for the Israelites. They refused to obey God and clear out all the other people living in Canaan, and because of this sin, more sin followed. Soon they were marrying people they shouldn't have been marrying and following false gods. They pretty much abandoned God, and God allowed them to be captured and taken prisoner by their enemies.
God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
Hey, isn't this kind of our fault?
Are you saying that if we would have cleared out the promised land like we were supposed to in the first place, none of this would have happened?
Yeah.
Huh. God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
And so God sent them a leader, a judge, to lead them to victory against the enemies who had captured them.
Woohoo!
And this is how it went for 325 years. The Israelites would follow and obey God, and he would bless them and give them victory over their enemies.
Charge!
But then they'd get kind of comfy, forget about God, and God would allow them to be beaten by their enemies.
Run away!
They'd cry out to God for help,
God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies!
and God would send a new judge to free them.
Woohoo!
And on it went like this.
Charge! Run away! God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies! Woohoo! Charge! Run away! God help us! We've been beaten and captured by our enemies! Woohoo! Charge! Run away!
Okay, enough. Okay. Needless to say, they were caught in a terrible cycle of sin. The cycle of sin and disobedience continued for years. You may wonder, where does it end?
Where does it end? Where does it end?
It ends with scene 7, the kings.
Or, out of the frying pan, into the fire.
The last judge during this time was a guy named Samuel. But when he retired, the Israelites started whining again.
We don't want to have a judge anymore.
We want a king.
The Philistines have a king.
The Amalekites have a king.
Why don't we have a king?
We never get anything we want.
You don't want a king. You know what a king's going to do? A king is going to take your sons and your daughters. He's going to make them work for him in his palace. He's going to take the crops out of your fields. He's going to use them for his own purposes. You're going to have to work for him. You're going to have to do all these things. You don't want a king. You're practically going to be slaves.
Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. Read our lips.
We want a king and we want him now.
You make me so furious.
So God gave them a king.
Woohoo!
He knew this would not solve everything, but he saw that they would have to learn the hard way. During this time, there were many kings. First, King Saul. King Saul was a pretty good king for a while, but then he slipped into sin and disobedience, and so God replaced him with David.
Bye-bye.
What?
You heard me.
Oh.
David was a very good king, and during his rule, the Israelites finally seemed to be on track, following God and being obedient. Don't get me wrong, David had his share of mess-ups, like the famous Bathsheba incident.
We have to bring that up.
Overall, David had a good rule.
Yeah.
And he was known for being a man after God's own heart. David set up the city of Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and God promised David that his son would be the one to build the temple, and that David's family would rule forever.
Yes!
So David died.
What? I just got here.
And Solomon became king.
Thank you very much.
Whatever. Just
I'm bad.
Solomon was
Oh,
a
yeah.
great king and did build the temple. But in the end, he blew it all.
What?
Yeah, by disobeying God and worshiping other false gods, Solomon set off a chain reaction that led to Israel's ruin.
I did all that?
Yep.
Oh.
And after Solomon's death, a kind of civil war broke out between the north and the south of Israel.
Northern Israel is the best. Southern Israel second best. Go north!
Oh, Ahmed, do you know what time it is?
what time is it, Ariana Stein?
It's time for the perfect cheer.
I should have known that. Who's that Israelite that's the best?
It's me. It's me.
I said, who's that Israelite that's the best?
It's me. It's me. Northern Israel, we don't want to hear it, because we're the Israelites with the most spirit.
So go back home and shut your mouth. The coolest Jews come from the south.
Southern Spirit rocks! Woo!
So good. You were so good.
Oh, it's
Israel was split, and as a result of Solomon's sin, just as God has warned. Both kingdoms from the north and south were led by king after king after king, almost all bad kings. Further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until...
Hey, wait a minute.
Hi, Solomon. Hey, what's up?
Well, what about that promise that God made that, there'd be a king who would reign on the throne of David forever and ever?
Jesus. It's Jesus.
Who?
Jesus is the
Jesus?
king from your family that'll rule forever and ever and ever.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm getting to it.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
Do you mind if I just...
Nope. Yep,
Okay,
carry
great.
on. Carry on.
Where was I? Let's see.
Further and further.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, further and further from God, the nation of Israel grew until scene 8, the exile.
Or we'll be back.
During the time of the kings, God had sent prophets to warn the people. These were men sent by God to speak for him, warning the people away from sin.
Okay, folks, step away from the sin. There's nothing to see here. Now step away from the sin and back toward the God of your ancestors. I am a trained professional. Back to your obedient lives, citizens.
But no dice, nothing worked. So God brought the ruin on Israel that he had told Solomon he would. Northern Israel was attacked by a country called Assyria. They were captured and hauled off to Assyria as slaves and servants. Southern Israel, now called Judah.
Who's the coolest of countries?
It's Judah. It's Judah.
I said, who's the coolest of countries?
It's Judah. It's Judah.
Hey, do you guys mind here? I'm just doing
Southern
this.
Spirit rocks! Woo!
Okay, Judah was attacked by a country called Babylon. They too were captured and hauled off to Babylon as slaves and servants. During this time, lots of interesting stuff happened.
In the news today, a man named Isaiah, claiming to be a prophet of God, announced that there's coming a day when God will be sending a deliverer. The man said, and I quote, "Unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The man shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace," unquote. For more on this story, join us at 5.
Apparently, 3 young men, Shadrach, Meshach, and a bubblegum, were thrown into a fiery furnace today. They survived. More on this at 11.
In a spectacular story today, a man named Daniel is thrown into a den of hungry lions and survives. That and other news coming up at 5 o'clock.
In today's top story, Queen Esther, Queen of Persia and wife of King Xerxes, saves all the Jews in Persia from total annihilation.
Reports confirm that 50,000 Jews returned to the city of Jerusalem today. These Jews and their families were taken captive over 70 years ago by Babylon, but are the first to have returned to their homeland. A spokeswoman for the Israelites confirmed that they do plan to rebuild the temple, but that the rest of the city lies in ruins because of that Babylonian attack over 70 years ago. So, there's more coming on that.
And so it went. The Jews had been exiled from their homeland, but even as captives in these foreign countries, God still used his people. Time passed, and to make a long story short,
Too late.
70 years after they were taken captive, the first of them began to make their way home. There was a man named Nehemiah who was still living in Persia at this time. When reports came back from Jerusalem that the city was in ruins, his heart was broken.
My heart is broken. King Artaxerxes, you must let me return to Jerusalem to rebuild the wall.
Are you nuts?
No, with the wall destroyed, the enemies of my people will be free to attack. Jerusalem will be taken again. I must return and rebuild so that my God will be honored.
Okay, you can go.
Thanks.
All right.
And Nehemiah leads us to Scene 9, the return to Jerusalem.
Or deja vu. I feel like I've been here before.
Nehemiah returned to Jerusalem with the help of King Artaxerxes and rallied the Jews to begin rebuilding the wall.
Come on, Jews, we're going to rebuild this wall, and God is really going to be honored. The city will be strong again, and God's people will be free to return at last. Let's do this.
And so the Jewish people worked and worked.
Hi-ho,
Hi-ho, it's off to work we go.
Around the clock they worked. They faced much opposition. Enemies tried to stop them, and they carried their swords in one hand and their tools in the other.
Charlie,
Yeah?
your hammer is in the other hand. You might want to switch them.
Oh, okay.
There
Yeah,
you go.
all right.
That's better. All right.
But despite the opposition they faced, they rebuilt the entire wall around the city of Jerusalem in 52 days.
Woohoo!
During the rebuilding of the walls, Nehemiah became governor, and he led the people in an amazing thing.
My friends, the time has come to return to being God's people and living in God's way. God has brought us back to the land that God promised to Abraham. And now it is time to return to being God's people and living in His way.
And in a way, that happened. The people recommitted themselves to God and to living in His ways for the first time in many years. They didn't get it perfect, but it was closer than they had been for a long time.
Time passed, about 400 years to be exact. Not much is recorded about what took place during this time.
We know that during that time, Rome was going from city to city and taking captive and taking over these lands. They came and took over the whole region of Judea, where the Jews were. They didn't enslave them, but they put a king in charge to rule over them. His name was Herod.
Not much else happened during that time. The Jews continued their lives, as did the rest of the world, following God, but not knowing what it was like to be in that perfect relationship with God that He designed for them in the beginning.
Until one silent night, the cry of a newborn baby was heard from the depths of a filthy stable.
But that is the rest of the story. After all, a good author always leaves room for a sequel.